Hello, my name is Wendy Patrick, and I am a senior attorney at Prosecutors Center for Excellence. We are going to be talking with Jeff Rosen today. He is the Santa Clara County District Attorney. And the presentation you're going to be hearing is part of our quick learning series, and it's entitled The Power of the 13th Law Enforcement Agency, a DA Investigators Gun Violence Task Force. And I'd like to welcome to the program, Jeffrey Rosen. Thank you for joining us, Jeff.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, one of the things that I explained that we do here is we look for offices that are doing interesting things that are potentially able to be replicated by other offices around the nation. And your office caught my eye for the amazing job you're doing with your investigations division, your Bureau of Investigations, and the way that it's partnering with fellow law enforcement agencies, 12 of them in your county, and just doing great work for the community and keeping your community members safe. So to put this great conversation in context, can you please describe your county, the population? Are you rural? Are you urban? All of the above.
Santa Clara County is the largest county in Northern California. San Jose is our largest city of about 1 million people. Santa Clara County has approximately 2 million people. And in addition, it's a mixture of an urban core in San Jose, a lot of suburbs, and some open space in the county, which is still primarily agricultural. So it's a mix of those things. We serve about 2 million people in Santa Clara County, and it's a very diverse place. There's no majority race or ethnicity.
All right, sounds wonderful. And I know the climate's wonderful as well, those of us that live in California.
Nice.
Tell us about the size of your office. How many deputy DAs, how many investigators, support staff?
Sure. So the size of the DA's office, we have approximately 630 employees, about 190 or so are prosecutors, approximately 90 are in our Bureau of Investigations, who are police officers that came to work for us after previously working in other police officer organizations. We have a victim services unit, which has approximately 50 people in it that serves victims of crime. And then the other thing that's a little bit unusual about our office and kind of leads into our discussion is I also run the crime laboratory. So there are 75 criminalists that work in our crime laboratory, and it's a state-of-the-art, top-notch facility, as would be befitting of Silicon Valley. And it helps us do a lot of interesting things that help our community.
Well, you wear a lot of hats and you don't sleep, Jeff. I think you revealed that unintentionally. That's terrific. That's a lot of terrific work. And I also know that you are doing an amazing job, you and your office, partnering to stamp out gun crimes in particular. If you could sort of tell us how you began, how you got your office involved in really making the community a safer place when it comes to fighting all kinds of different firearm crimes.
I think where this began was we had our first mass shooting approximately 8 or 9 years ago in Gilroy, the southern part of our county, and it was at the big Gilroy Garlic Festival. Tens of thousands of people go to it each year, and we had a horrible mass shooting where 3 people were murdered and dozens were injured. And I remember at the time thinking to myself that this was our mass shooting. So now we're going to deal with this, and now we're done. We've had ours. We're not going to have another one. And then 3 years later, we had our second mass shooting, the largest mass shooting in the history of our county, where 10 people were murdered that worked at the Valley Transportation Authority, our light rail service here. And that happened about 300 yards from my office. And it was after that shooting that myself and others started to think, what else can we do here in addition to prosecuting individuals that have guns that shouldn't have guns? What else can we do to try to reduce gun crime in our community? Because in addition to these mass shootings, we saw that for the last 15 years in our county, the number of aggravated assaults where a firearm was used had doubled. And so while we are a very safe county, still for us, we just have seen many, many more guns on the streets than we did 15 or 20 years ago.
Yeah, we talk a lot nationwide, don't we, about how easy it is to get a gun and a gun getting into the wrong hands, especially when people don't have criminal records. So there's not all those bars to them actually purchasing one legally. But I also understand you have a ghost gun problem in your jurisdiction, as many of us do. Can you tell us a little bit about how prevalent it is to see ghost gun crimes?
Extremely prevalent. Close to 40% of the aggravated assaults with firearms are ghost guns, meaning guns that were personally manufactured without serial numbers, more difficult to trace. There's a lot of people making guns using 3D printers in our county, and we realized we needed to do something here. I think we started to think to ourselves, what can we do? And we have good relationships with the law enforcement agencies around us. And, there was a law that was passed in California in 2016 called a red flag law, a gun violence restraining order. And the first year that it was passed, actually the first couple of years after the law was passed, nobody was using it. I mean, literally nobody in the state was really using it. It was passed by the legislature, but law enforcement had not started to use it. And we had a case that came here. One of our local agencies contacted one of our prosecutors and said, "Hey, this woman told me she's in the midst of getting a divorce from her husband, and there's a lot of violence in the home, and he's talking about taking his guns and shooting me and my whole family and so forth." Uh, and the officer said to our prosecutor, "Can I get a gun violence restraining order?" And our prosecutor said, "What's that?" And the officer hung up the phone and said, "You're the lawyer, you figure it out." So our
Mm.
prosecutor figured it out, and we realized this law was passed, and that was the first gun violence restraining order that we got. And we saw how helpful it was to take guns away from people that are a threat to themselves or others, either a family situation or getting fired from their job or an onset of mental illness. And that was the first, but since then we've done thousands of gun violence restraining orders, and there are absolutely dozens and dozens of mass shootings that have been prevented because we've gotten gun violence restraining orders. I mean, literally, we had individuals on the way to the mall ready to shoot it up, and we stopped them. We took their guns. Individuals that were going to shoot their family, individuals that were going to go to the office and shoot their coworkers. So it's a very powerful tool, and that was kind of our first foray into trying to do something beyond just prosecution.
Bravo, Jeff. That is wonderful. We often say it's not so much about prediction, but prevention. And that's what it sounds like you're doing with
Yeah,
your
yeah.
collaboration there. And with respect to that collaboration, can you tell us a little bit about how your own Bureau of Investigation became involved? How did you make them the 13th law enforcement agency, as I've entitled this presentation,
Yeah.
for your county? How did that happen?
Well, it was clear to us in the DA's office, to our law enforcement partners, that guns were a huge problem in our county. And we wanted to have a task force that would remove guns from people that should not have guns, either because they have felony convictions and they're legally prohibited, or because they're a threat to themselves or others, or because they're gun traffickers and they're making ghost guns or personally manufactured guns. And I worked with our board of supervisors to see if they would give us a little bit of funding to begin a task force that would be run by the DA's Bureau of Investigation. And what I said to the board is, if you give me a little bit of money, I will then go to the other police chiefs in the county and our federal partners, and I will get resources from them. And then we'll have a task force that will focus on nothing but guns, and we will show you the results. And just in the last 2 years, this task force has removed 500 guns from the streets from people that were criminals, weren't supposed to have guns, people that were about to hurt themselves or hurt other people, or people that were making illegal firearms. And so the way that we got funding from, we got federal grants, we got some state grants, and success begets success. And so, the first couple of years we did this, it was slower starting, but as we got some successes and started to put together some big cases, that encouraged the police department, that encouraged alcohol, tobacco, and firearms to partner with us. And because the DA's office runs the crime lab, then I was able to say to all the police chiefs, if you bring the crime lab all of the guns that you find at crime scenes and all of the shell casings you find at crime scenes, whether it's just somebody shooting at a stop sign or an armed robbery or a murder, bring us every shell casing, every gun. We will put it through NIBIN. The ATF gave us a NIBIN terminal, and that will help us solve more crimes more quickly. So running the crime lab helped, getting a little support from our board of supervisors helped. And then we've always had collaborative relationships with our law enforcement agencies, and all of our investigators at one time or another worked in a law enforcement agency, either in our county or in another county. So we have a lot of ambassadors. I mean, some would say spies, but I don't think that's the right word. I think ambassador is a better word. We have a lot of ambassadors to the different police departments, and that's helped us be successful.
And can you remind our listeners what NIBIN does?
So what NIBIN does is all of the shell casings and all of the firearms leave a unique print when the gun fires that particular shell casing. And then all of that unique print that is left on the shell casing is put into a nationwide database by alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. And so what it does, it's kind of like a DNA database, but for firearms. And so it allows you to link shootings that happened in different places at different times. It allows you to see, oh, this was the same gun that did the crime in the north part of our county, and then a month later did a crime in the south part of our county. And so then it's an investigative lead that helps you solve cases more quickly.
And in terms of solving cases more quickly, the other 12 law enforcement agencies that you partner with seem to all have been on board with your idea in terms of consolidating resources, allocating funding, you achieving funding. It seems like you really did find they were all on the same page from the beginning. Is that the way it started? And probably is that the reason it's so successful?
I think it's successful because the police chiefs were saying to me and to others, our officers are telling us that they've never seen so many guns on the streets before. You know, one of our large agencies, maybe, 15, 20 years ago, they would take, one or two guns off the street from criminals in a week. Now they're taking 10 guns off the street in a week. Like they just saw a huge increase. We looked at our statistics in terms of the number of crimes that where somebody was using a gun, and our statistics had increased. And I think there was a collective feeling that, okay, what can we do to try to handle this in a more upstream fashion to kind of get the people that are going to use the guns before they commit the crime? What can we do to take the guns away from them? So it's something where there was an alignment. And I think the other piece here for our board of supervisors to bring them along was one thing we said is, look, there's all kinds of things happening in family court where judges are ordering firearms to be removed during these divorce proceedings. And we can tell you that the guns are not being removed. Like the judge orders it, but there's no mechanism for a law enforcement agency to actually go get those guns if the person doesn't turn the guns in. So we said, again, if you give us a little bit of money, we will get some money from the feds, from ATF, from some state grants, and we will then go and remove those guns from those homes. And it's a labor-intensive process, as you can imagine. You don't just, send a patrol officer to knock on the door. Like you need to have a team that works on it. But our argument, our pitch to our board and our community was, look, we understand that during times of intense stress, having access to firearms makes that situation much worse and much deadlier. And what's a prime situation where that happens? When there's a relationship that's breaking up. And so that was something that was persuasive to the board of supervisors. And again, for the law enforcement agencies, they found that persuasive as well.
Jeff, do you know why guns proliferated so significantly and sounds like almost rapidly on the streets in your county?
Look, I think part of it is the ghost guns, that people
Mm,
could make them on their own now. And before that, you either had to uh, buy it from someone on the street or go into a gun store and buy one. And there's all kinds of forms and paperwork that have to be filled out under California law to get a gun in a gun store. So that can be a little bit of a deterrent to someone getting a gun. But the ability to make them in your house on your own absolutely contributed to it, as well as the internet allowing people to buy parts for the guns separately and then assemble it themselves and evade the different legal requirements for purchasing a gun. So I would say that the DIY culture is something that contributed to the increase. I would just add that one of the things that I encourage all of the prosecutors in our office and all of my fellow elected DAs around the country is that you have a lot of power as the elected DA to convene groups of people to try to tackle a difficult problem in your community. If you're the elected DA, you got elected because you have a lot of community support. And if you say, I'd like to have a meeting to talk about gun violence, people will show up and the police chiefs will show up. Remember, we're filing their cases. So they have an incentive to work with us. And I think that there's certainly traditional roles that DA's offices have, but there's also some non-traditional roles. And I think that this area of gun crime and trying to get at it before the mass shooting is something that's really helpful. I mean, we would say to ourselves in the office, is it really enough that we prosecute the murder after it happens? Isn't there anything we could do to make it less likely that there was a murder in the first place? And there is.
yeah.
And that's gun violence restraining orders, that's a gun violence task force. And so I think if you go into it with the mindset of here's a problem, we can't solve it all on our own in the DA's office, but we want to help solve that problem. And will you join us and help us too? You get good results.
I think that's terrific. Thank you for that information and that inspiration. That's a wonderful way to sort of make an ending here. So thank you so much, Jeff, for joining us.
Have a great afternoon, and thank you so much for inviting me to speak to Prosecutors Center for Excellence. I think it's an excellent organization.
Oh, thank you for that as well. And to our viewers, you have listened to The Power of the 13th Law Enforcement Agency, a district attorney's investigators gun violence task force. My name is Wendy Patrick. I'm a senior attorney at Prosecutors Center for Excellence. This program has been brought to you by our Quick Learning series. Thank you so much for joining us.